Right, welcome everyone to another Sky Community Call. Today's Wednesday, August the 20th, and yeah, we have some short news, and then I'm going to have Rajiv from Viridian to continue their segment on accessibility and ecosystem engagement, and at the end, Rune will keep discussing the SkyJet framework overhaul and ecosystem entities. So yeah, from now on, and as the different responsibilities of my team grow, I'm going to start transitioning this role to Rajiv, who's going to be, I'm not sure if interim host or final host. That's potentially more on your side, Rajiv. But yeah, starting September the 3rd, I think he'll be like the host. More announcements on that on the forum, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, Rajiv, if there's anything that I'm missing from that news.
I look forward to it. Obviously, very tough boots to fill, Juan. So hope to keep the great quality moving forward.
Nice, thank you. But yeah, then if you're ready, we can start with the status of the landscape.
Yep. So we'll keep it as always with a very brief overview on the demand side analytics. I'm happy to be back actually after a few weeks in a very unfriendly Asian time zone. So it's been quite interesting to see just the whole what's happened in the market landscape during that time. During July, we saw that very big growth, but over the last few weeks since the last community call, that has flattened out. The market's almost taken a pause to breathe. What we are seeing in terms of the wider landscape from what we're tracking, RV, first of all, the stablecoin markets in RV, something that we think is structurally important for stablecoins. And we are going to be building this much further out in terms of the data and analytics that we capture here. But I guess the call out is redemptions in the USDT market, whereas deposits have continued to flow in the USDC market. We're not sure what's driving that, but you can see that playing out when we look at the yields on RV versus SUSDS. So that peak, that jump in USDT, as I mentioned, we're going to look much deeper at this. We do think, just like Pendle, this is so structurally important to the stablecoins market. With Syrup and Athena, over the period, we've seen the premium that they have in terms of yield versus USDS. That's pretty much, you've seen that higher yield through this period, and that has been reflected in some inflows that we've seen for both. Interestingly, those inflows are actually for the bulk, if not entirely, driven by Spark. So both with Syrup and also in SUSDE, the bulk of those inflows are coming from Spark allocating for higher yields, and a relatively stable period for both SDI and SUSDS. As we look at the USDS ecosystem in more detail, over the period, you can see for USDS, a drop in supply that has been largely driven, in fact, pretty much completely driven by the maturity of the Spark Points Pendle pool. And as that matured, you saw all those outflows in USDS, and a significant amount. It's about, it peaked at about 550 million. And on maturity date, you saw that came down pretty much entirely. During the period, though, the one big call out, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've seen this, but Sky Token Rewards has flipped Sky Savings. It's actually just lost that position. But during this period, we did see Sky Token Rewards flip Sky Savings for the most popular USDS feature. And when we launched USDS, Sky Token Rewards was always positioned as one of the core features. I think it's had slower adoption, but now you really see it coming into its own and sort of being up there driving demand. On Morpho, we've seen a drop in USDS supply, and that's been driven by additional borrow demand. And that's all been offset by an increase in USDS supply on Spark Lend, and that's also, reflected in borrowers repaying USDS, and also, as I touched upon, the inflows into the token rewards offering. And you can see that in more detail. That's been, oops, got trouble with my clicking here. We've seen that for both the Sky Farm and also the Spark Farm. Interestingly, on the Spark Farm, we see a new entry. According to Arkham Intelligence, this is Justin Sun taking a big position. Obviously, we have no way of verifying this. We rely on the open source tagging that we see there. And we've also seen new demand coming from a Pendle pool. And I'll just pause to sort of call this one out, because I think this is sort of a great example when we talk about, what agents are doing and sort of the role they play forward of a structured product. So in this case, what you're seeing is the Spark agent has sort of created a Pendle pool for built upon USDS Spark token rewards. And in turn, they've taken the derivative or the P token from that pool, and they've used that as collateral in a Morpho market where USDS can be borrowed. And that's exactly what we saw with this drop in USDS in the Morpho. It was actually additional borrowing that came, from having this new market. And I call this out because when I think of the role of agents, we always call out sort of the more vanilla ones of allocating where you see the best risk adjusted return, and that it's sort of easy to get your head around when it's like something like Syrup or Athena USDE. But here I call this out because I think it's a great example of how agents are innovating and creating new products and new yield opportunities on top of the underlying core features that Sky has. So on top of token rewards, on top of the SSR, and we saw that, we've seen how powerful this can be, not just from previous examples in Pendle, but the last call out I'll sort of have this week is you see even Athena in the period, their offering on Pendle is getting serious traction. So that's, I think, the main call outs for the period, and I'll hand back.
Nice. Thanks for that, Rajiv. Really appreciate it. I don't know if there are any questions. I don't see any at the moment. Hopefully, you guys are getting as much value as as always, right? This right, at least I've heard a lot of different praise for this segment and people wanting it. But yeah, all right. So Rune, hopefully you're ready for the main segment.
Hello, everybody.
Nice.
We're back with Rune Radio or Q&A or whatever you want it to be, depending on what kind of questions we get today. Actually, just give me 1 second here. I just got to turn on a little bit more light. This is light coming with me. Back. Okay, I'm not sure that helped at all, but yeah, whatever. Okay, so like the purpose of the call today is just, as always, Q&A. Like, there's not really been any new development, anything specific to address, right? Other than, of course, I mean, more, or rather, the obvious topic is, of course, to talk about the really gigantic changes and proposals that were made. We had a call about it 10 days ago now or so. Last week, the ecosystem entities proposal was approved. So now the ecosystem entities, the grants, they're in the Atlas, and yeah, so meaning they're already approved and now they're set to be voted through an executive. I think it's probably on track to happen tomorrow, but I'm not totally sure. I didn't verify that, so hopefully it is, because there's a lot of stuff to do with that as soon as it goes through. But yeah, it's it's a really gigantic transfer of assets, right? It's something like $250 million worth of assets that are being moved out of the protocol into the two major ecosystem entities, the Sky Frontier Foundation, which will be responsible for long-term development and acceleration of the ecosystem, and then the Fortification Foundation, which is going to focus on ecosystem resilience, long-term protection, lobbying, and this type of activity, more on and also systemic risk and unquantifiable risk management, and kind of be more in the background, while the Frontier Foundation is going to handle all of the kind of the short-term exciting stuff related to speeding up, accelerating, developing the ecosystem. One thing that's going to happen, also one thing to call out, is that the treasury management function is also like a part of the big announcement I made. It is not really like activating the treasury management function is not really a part of the Atlas edit, other than the modification of how the staking rewards work for the system. So USDS denominated staking rewards for Sky holders they'll go up by 50%, but it's meant to be, this will happen just as the transfer of assets into Frontier Foundation and Fortification Foundation happens. And the goal is basically that as those entities start staking, right, because they have these, of course, what's crucial is they're receiving almost the entire treasury of Sky tokens. But they're receiving them into these things called their unsellable Sky endowments. So the point is that these entities are set up to be these basically like token sinks for Sky, right? They're not supposed to sell them or distribute them or even reward them to contributors. Rather, they can only use them for staking and for staking borrow. And that way actually use them in a very sustainable way for long-term development without diluting Sky holders or spending expenses out of the core protocol. So they will be staking all of their Sky as soon as they receive them, and then hopefully it all lines up so that there's not, so that what stakers notice is just an increase in their staking rewards, and they don't actually notice that there's both an increase and then there's a dilution effect of the staking as these entities start staking. But in the end, overall, as I said, they're designed to be minimally dilutive of Sky holders. So even though they dilute the staking rewards that are available to Sky holders, but because they can't sell, then they have they don't interact at all with the buybacks, right? They just hold on to the tokens. And in the short run, there's going to be, in the short run, there's this minimum staking rewards that is set to be relatively higher compared to the buybacks. But the way the treasury management function works long term is that 80% of the asset flow that goes through the treasury management function goes to the Sky smart burn engine, right? So buyback and burn, right? And that's another thing, of course, is that with the treasury management function, the concept of buyback, it effectively goes away and it's replaced just with burn. There's no such thing as buyback without burn. It's just always going to be direct burn. However, there is actually an exception to that in the very short run, and that relates to the Sky Farm, which is currently not independent. So it requires a system to do buyback using the primary, like using the smart burn engine. So the smart burn engine does a buyback and it then allocates some of that buyback to the Sky Farm. But any leftover Sky that will then sit in the pulse proxy will just be burned. and then as soon as possible, it just becomes completely eliminated. So it's pure. There's just only burn. Yeah, I mean, I would very much appreciate some questions about, like, this is just such a unbelievably complex topic, right? There's so many different angles to cover this. So, you know, it would be very useful if I could know what people would like to know more about, specifically how it impacts different parts of the ecosystem. Let me think of. Oh yeah, there was a major. So in last week when we didn't do a community call, there was a major leadership meeting of various launch project and Sky ecosystem adjacent companies and teams. And one thing that became a lot more firm from that was the kind of the pipeline of the Genesis agents, and potentially it seems like there will be proposed even more than the kind of the numbers that have been mentioned in the past of like between 8 to 11 Genesis agents, but it actually might be as many as 16 to 17 potentially. Obviously, there's still lots of governance involved in making that happen. There's a lot of like voting and allocating of capital and that kind of stuff. But the number 17 appears to be that's around the limit of how much bandwidth Sky core governance has available to realistically handle, you know, all like this many Sky agents in parallel before we get to sort of major AI breakthroughs and AI governance, which is expected to be years off, right? So in the short run, there's lots of like structural improvements from better data structuring and various AI tools that can provide different useful that can provide useful support in different ways. There's also things like the allocation system being more automated and more powerful. But switching to sort of an entirely AI native method of running the atlas is going to be the thing that actually allows real scalability in the ecosystem. And until that's reached, then there just has to be humans on top of everything, right? You really can't risk some stuff being just maybe monitored, right? It has to be guaranteed that there are humans really deeply monitoring every part of it. And yeah, all in all, the expectation is that, well, maybe the most optimistic expectation is that up to 17 Genesis agents can be supported this way. So Genesis agents, that just mean, I mean, they basically mean early agents that have to be governance approved before agent creation becomes permissionless. And then it also mean that Sky will capitalize them partially, and as a result, their tokens will be used to distribute to USDS holders and Sky holders. So Sky holders will get a share, an opportunity to get these tokens for free of all 17 or up to 17 that will be created. And they will just be rolled out one by one over the next couple of years. Yeah, I mean, okay, so another thing I was, yeah, okay, good. Okay, now we can get a little bit more specific with this question here, right? So since Sky is so complicated and vast, are there plans to update Sky to Money with all the various details in an easy to understand way? I see a big problem in people understanding what Sky is. Yeah, so that's a very good question. And there are absolutely, an effort on the way to do this. So there are like actually multiple projects in parallel, right? There's like the short-term need to try to update, just to also like, it's kind of outdated at this point because it's still sort of in launch, right? Introducing Sky, introducing USDS and that kind of stuff. And I think that's going to be overhauled a bit, so it gets a little bit more just like to the point around this is what's going on. And then there's also like a broader overhaul that is focused more on like getting into the details of stars and Genesis agents and this type of stuff, positioning the ecosystem, more like a platform rather than that just USDS the product. So this is all coming bit by bit. There's also an effort underway to standardize info.sky.money to make it more TradFi friendly, basically. Of course, the reality is like all these things they're all step by step. Obviously, as there's no other way to do it, obviously. But I think in general, what's still happening at this stage is that there's been, even now, right? Like even now we have the Sky Agent framework overhaul, and there's even discussions around how to deal with the like renaming of the Sky Agent framework overhaul, which is really that overhaul like feeds into like long-term needs for how to do AI governance efficiently, securely at scale. But in the short run, the need is simply just to educate people, just to have some sense of what's going on. So this is all going to be sort of settled and figured out over the next couple of weeks and months, and then continuously updated and communicated to make things simpler and easier to understand. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, right, so we need experts in the Discord forum to help explain this. I mean, I think what's interesting is, so the problem is you basically need, I mean, and then Rajiv brings up the point that, well, they could just join the community call. So the problem is some average person that don't know why they should be interested in Sky, they're of course not going to jump on Rune Radio and ask me questions directly and have me try to break down some complex thing. But it's quite difficult for actually most other people at this stage to kind of explain an arbitrary part of the system, right? Most people who work in Sky, they know very well the specific area that they specialize in, but it's already so scaled up that there are not many people that has like the full end-to-end view. And those that tend to do are like ones like working with Atlas and that kind of stuff, right? That really understand it in this sort of abstract rules-based kind of way. So what would be really cool is if we later can get some more powerful chatbots, basically, that can, so it's as if you have sort of an expert in your pocket, right? That could be in the forum and in Discord and that kind of stuff. And there's some effort on the way to do this. It's just obviously it's hard to do it and have them not provide wrong information, especially when it's as complex as Sky, right? And also when the details are so specific as they are in Sky. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be progress on this, and it's obviously going to be a big game changer when the progress is is it really pushed out there and starts getting properly accessible by people. And so anecdotally, I mean, there's still the reality is like even just what Sky has sort of from the past, right? Like just the OG like MakerDAO infrastructure of having a stablecoin, having live vaults and doing RWAs, and then having all of that be real time and reported on info.sky.money is already like, even to this day, there are like tons of people, like professionals in TradFi and just like very smart people that handle large sums of money and are very familiar with finance and markets and this, like basically this kind of stuff. And then they see just the sort of basics of what is available right now in Sky, and they're just totally mind blown, right? It's just like it's looking extremely good, right? Especially because there's profits on top of everything else. Like the tech really works and really makes sense to somebody that understands finance, and then it's immensely profitable. I mean, it's just looking really good. So the problem is like simply just getting out there, right? And getting it in a format that is accessible to these people. I think there's also like a shift in mentality around who is the core audience, and it's probably more like financial professionals rather than retail than at least I thought in the past, right? I think like USDS was designed to be so that if you have retail that want to use it, it should be easy and available and familiar for them to use it. But like it just seems like there's a lot more. It's like it's harder to, like, if you're just a normal person, it's hard to, many people, you know, especially the people where in places where something like Tether is very popular, it actually is very hard to get people to even care about getting a good savings rate at all. Like I mean, or even getting any savings rate. They just like, oh, I just want to escape inflation. I just want to hold dollar. I don't even care about a savings rate. And then even if you get people that understand that, it can be hard to, you know, to explain the difference between why it makes sense to get a better rate so you can get a better return. But financial professionals, they completely understand this, right? So that's a kind of a different audience. Where, and I mean, it's getting clear that there's like a proper product market fit in that sense, right? And I think also generally you can see this, and like when you view the stats on info.sky.money and just generally about Sky, it is very much like whale dominated, right? It's a lot of very large users that tend to use the system, which is, I mean, it's both good and bad, right? I mean, obviously it's really good in the sense that it signals that the system is very much this scalable backend, which is the most important thing that Sky is designed to be, right? It's really meant to be like a sort of an underlying infrastructure that sits at like the bottom of the financial stack. So that's, so from that perspective, it's a good thing. What would also be cool if there were lots of like normal people in retail that then had, you know, that would actually be using it and get that direct access to the same terms and the same efficiency that the scalable institutional professional users they have. But it could also just be, it's just like, I mean, it's just too, like I said, it's just hard to get people to care about it, understand, and so on. And obviously retail are more like, they're less likely to take risks and so on. So probably it's better, you know, it's like the way to get more normal people to understand how to get the benefits that the professionals are getting is just to get even more professionals, get even more scale, and then it will be sort of proven and also basically sort of grab enough attention that you'll have more people that will dare to jump in. And fundamentally, it's just also like the fundamental objective is, of course, just grow the ecosystem, grow the protocol, and scale it. And there's just clearly like there's a different level of scale amongst institutional and professional users versus regular retail, unless you're like Tether and you manage to really just tap into it in this extremely scalable way they've done.
Yeah. Something else to mention is that the idea of endgame in general is to specialize people, so not everyone needs to understand everything. But I mean, they can, and then if they want, they should. But I think the dream is to have people being able to just work on what they do best and make it easier for everyone. We have a new question, Ron, regarding the farms. It says all 5 farms will be used by the Frontier Foundation, including Chronicle, and will the foundation use the yield earned to fund the self-sustainable activities? Please expand more on the sustained acts.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so the Frontier Foundation will. That's exactly the point, right? It will seek to maximally deploy its assets in, you know, to get a good risk-adjusted return, keeping it within Sky, right, to avoid the capital leaks outside of Sky. Yeah, just try to like sort of yield balance across the different sources of staking. And then it will use this we'll use it to fund its activities, but primarily what it will really use to fund its activities once it uses up the initial USDS grant it has received will be the ability to borrow more USDS using Sky as collateral. And so from that perspective, it's more like the staking rewards, they can be thought maybe more of like they're not going to be used to directly pay for stuff. It's more like it'll be used to keep the borrowing sustainable. Just a second, I have to get rid of my cat. Yeah, it's the same cat, in case anybody were around for the governance calls, community calls that we used to do all the way. I mean, literally 10 years ago, we were doing the same thing. And it's the very same cat that used to interrupt the calls back then. Now it just got old, but it didn't really change its behavior much. But like I said, it's like I really think it's such a huge deal that with the ecosystem entities, Sky now gets this like a couple of years, like potentially many years, right, of just extremely resource intensive development of public goods for the ecosystem, right? Development of core technology, all the like core work streams. And all of this will be funded in a way that is going to be basically invisible to Sky holders, in the sense that there's not going to be any Sky sold in the market. It's not going to be any Sky paid out to contributors. And there's not going to be any budget taken from the core protocol. And instead, it will all be done through debt financing, right? It's all going to be done by issuing a lot of STUSDS, which will then have a probably relatively high rate. And then the Frontier Foundation will basically eventually have to find a way to sort of pay off its debt, probably from incubating and launching, and selling off the tokens of new agents, or in the worst case scenario, simply wind down its activities and get to a very low burn rate, and then have the staking income on the Sky simply cover the interest rate on the staking borrow, and then just like slowly turn its staking position into a self-repaying loan. But it's obviously just like it's a very powerful way to do it, because we get to spend all the resources, get all of the developments in the short run when the big moment of opportunity is there, and then when it's all kind of built out 3 years from now, I mean, of course, it's not all going to be built, but I mean, the amount of support, the amount of infrastructure that will exist in 3 years to support the self-sustainable growth of the stars will just be orders of magnitude more than what exists now, right? So that just is going to really it's creating every possible opportunity for the ecosystem to really just reach this like self sort of auto ignition stage, right, where it just grows and expands and innovates all on its own, and you don't really need to rely so much on a foundation or like a core project or anything like that anymore. And of course, then if there's a price increase in the Sky token, so it can support even more borrow, or if there's just like a huge amount of staking coming in, or if the foundation is able to successfully incubate more agents on its own and actually make that into a profitable activity, then it's just going to be even more money and like even more funds for even more development. But it's not even, that's just going to be like an extra plus, basically. In fact, you could even say like at this stage, there's very little remaining before Sky at least is like really just like at a point where as a whole, this ecosystem is highly self-sustainable already. But with the kind of the debt financing that the creation of the ecosystem entities unlocks in the short run. That's really gonna like give us all of the core features that we could possibly hope for, right? We'll have USDS itself, which of course is also essential for unlocking funding, like the senior risk tokens, the junior risk tokens, just like all various like key pieces like Skylink, multi-chain, like the helper systems for things like allocation system and other Sky primitives. And then just like sort of tying it all together, like scalability, so that you can start permissionless creation of stars. All of these things, like once all of that is in place, it's like the ecosystem really will be very special and have some really, really unique different elements that work together to create an engine for very solid economic value creation.
The second part of that question, Rune, is how will the Frontier Foundation guarantee that that the deals, in this case BD with TradFi institutions, will benefit the entire Sky ecosystem rather than only a few agents? So how do we make sure that the Frontier Foundation is not, they're not favoring a few agents over the rest?
Yeah, basically how to maintain their neutrality. So actually, the Frontier Foundation is specifically set up to sort of put the right. It's sort of a giant bucket of all the nice to haves without putting need to haves in there, right? So, I mean, the answer is of course like the board. I'm going to be on the board. There's going to be other, right, like really trusted and long-term contributors in the ecosystem on the boards, and they will be expanded, and there will be board advisors, and they're just fundamentally like set up based on like, it's sort of built out of the track record of the launch project to deliver fair solutions that benefit the ecosystem as a whole. That's then getting further institutionalized with the Frontier Foundation. But in the end, it's like if it sort of it just it's not like it just somehow still fails at doing this properly, the risk that it can create is basically just like not being good at it, like not being good at generating value. Basically, it can't really sort of cause some kind of actual damage or risk to the ecosystem, right? Beyond its ability, like the sort of the opportunity cost. So this also means like it's like from the perspective of a Sky agent, like if the Frontier Foundation becomes biased or just like is badly managed and is not rewarding an agent that is actually doing really well for the ecosystem, then the worst thing that happens is sort of an absence of positive value, right? It's not that the Frontier Foundation has some way to impose negative value or cause losses or something like that. Anything like that is entirely with the core council and Sky governance and so on, right? And those are the things that Sky will continue to govern, right? So Sky can basically use a completely public process to very clearly and very orderly manage these types of things that are much more crucial, right? Like it's very, very important, of course, that there's no like unfair negative treatment of like unfair penalties applied to stars that didn't bribe the right person or something, right? If something like that ever happened, it would just be just an unmitigated disaster for the ecosystem, right? It would the butterfly effect, like the ripple effect of just like one completely sort of malicious, unwarranted penalty, or just like unfair treatment in some way through kind of the rules of the system itself applied to just a single star, right, would just kill off any kind of desire for, not any kind, but it would kill off, I think, 90% of the potential demand for creating stars, right? And that's because what's so exciting about the stars is that it's an opportunity for really a permissionless place to sort of play in a very large, very scaled up ecosystem, right? Like I think it's just that's the real value proposition of Sky. And having an entity like the Frontier Foundation support and incubate agents, like obviously that's great and all, but you can go to any other ecosystem, right? And you can get there. They'll have incubation programs and they have grants and they have all that stuff, right? But what they don't have is like very sort of reliable support structures of the type that Sky has available, right? So that's the one thing. Like the thing that is just completely essential is that the neutrality of like the Sky primitives, the neutrality of Sky governance, and the fairness of the kind of how stars interact with each other and how they compete and so on. That's the lifeblood. And then the performance of the Frontier Foundation on top of that is like a sort of an accelerant that can then make that speed up and make that go faster. And so the reason why it is really beneficial to sort of split out the complexity of doing the activities that the Frontier Foundation is going to do, like this sort of trying to accelerate the ecosystem, trying to develop. The reason why you want to accelerate away from kind of the crucial, critical need to have regulation is because you could have, it's because the task of accelerating the ecosystem is a bit more sort of messy and requires more judgment calls and is more gray area than the task of like enforcing rigorous, fair, open and permissionless rules and regulations, right? And so it would be very like the big risk. It's basically slippery slope risk, right? It's like the issue of if you have some gray area activity, then the kind of culture that comes with that could negatively influence the parts of the system that are supposed to handle the black and white stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's bad if the Sky Frontier Foundation doesn't perform its duties properly, but it would be like 100 times worse if that part of the system going bad would then start dragging down the extremely crucial governance, like the core governance of the system, right? And this is kind of the underlying logic also of core simplification, right? That you should really only keep in the core what you need to have in the core, because it's all about security, since security gives us scalability. And then with that scalability, because with that security, with that fairness, with that sort of stability, you can open up for permissionless use, and then you get this like 10 times number of users that are willing to engage with the system if they don't have to knock on people's doors or ask for permission or make some deal or something, right? But they can just go and they can just use it according to rules that they can easily predict in advance.
Nice.
Okay.
There's one more question, but it I don't know, it's a bit complicated. Maybe so it starts saying, is this sentence from the Sky ecosystem at this point is still part of the plan? If it is, would you kindly explain why? And the sentence is, while the temporary fixed parameters from Sky staking rewards is in effect, the CTSF4 asset accumulating to the staking rewards buffer will not be used for staking rewards and will only accumulate.
Yeah, I mean, so this has not been added into that. So the TMF is only live in the sense that the fixed parameters have been these temporary fixed parameters for Sky staking and temporary fixed parameters for Sky buyback is in effect. So that part of the TMF is in effect, and that's of course the most important part in many ways, because that's what really matters if you're an average token holder. But the entirety of the TMF and the various sort of asset flow functions and so on will be introduced bit by bit, and then when it goes live, it will sort of like it will be hooked up to work so that these fixed parameters for staking and buyback, they override the other parts of the TMF. So basically what will happen is like the staking rewards will be fixed at a certain amount. The buyback will be fixed at a certain amount. Then actually the buyback, it'll actually go away relatively fast. Actually, I don't know how long it'll take. It depends on how long it takes to fix to spin off the Sky Farm from the core protocol. And what will happen with the rewards is basically there will just be like the lower bound. So the rewards will just remain at the 300,000 per day. And then as the system grows larger and larger, eventually it will reach a scale where now it can naturally support staking rewards even higher than 300,000 per day. And then the burn thing, right, is a smart burn into. So burn would be like, it could be a lot more or it could be nothing, all depending on the price of Sky. Once basically the fully implemented smart burn engine is ready, which again, it depends on when. It's a sequential thing where first the Sky Farm has to be spun off, then basically the smart burn engine can be like gradually brought online to follow the TMF. And at first it'll be sort of very clunky with very slow adjustments. So it'll take a while, then it will start buying slower. It will take a while, then we'll start buying faster, depending on the price of Sky. And then eventually it will reach this like end state where it will react very fast. All right. Any last questions? Otherwise, let's call it. Okay. Yeah. All right. So can you elaborate on the 17 planned agents? Is that number just the capacity? Are there already 17 agents already in process? I guess you could think of it as like a sort of mixed pipeline. So it is the kind of the total. I mean, it's also, and the 17 number is also not it is not it's not necessarily the final number. It could be less than that. It's just that's basically there. That's the right now my expectation is that 17 will be like hard coded into the atlas as a maximum upper bound. And then of that 17, there actually are essentially like what do you call it? Sort of proposals for the business model and like the sort of the reasoning for why does it make sense to have this as a Genesis agent? Why does it make sense to have that as a Genesis agent? Because all the Genesis agents, obviously, they need to kind of have a very particular reason for like, why does this agent specifically justify using more core governance bandwidth that could go to something else? And there's some really cool, I mean, there's obviously Spark and Grove that are these like sort of very large bets on just the general case DeFi, general case RWAs. And then some of the other Genesis agents, they are, some of them are much smaller in scope. Some of them are as big or even bigger. And they're more or less sort of sequential, like ordered sequentially, in the sense that like sort of the further you go out, the less fleshed out they are, more or less. So yeah, it's they're sort of like, there are good proposals for like what 17 solid Genesis agents could be, but there are not 17 founders already selected and all of that. That's something that'll take a lot of time to do. All right. Thanks everyone for the call.
Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, I think we're out of questions, right? No more questions.
Yes.
And we'll probably continue next week. So if you have some last question, you can just come back next week and we can keep chatting.
Sounds good. We'll keep you posted in the forum. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a nice one.
See you around, guys.